Well, good morning. This is SELCO's commission meeting for April. The date is 17 April, and we're going to call the meeting to order at 8:02 a.m. And with the first thing, we have review and consider the March 2025 bill schedules and warrants. Do we have any questions or concerns on the warrants or schedules? And if not, can I have a motion to accept?
So moved.
Okay, and I'll second it. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so the warrants and bill schedules are approved. Next is review and consider meeting minutes of March 25th, 2025. Do we have any questions or concerns about the minutes from that meeting? Hearing none, do we have a motion to accept the minutes for March?
So moved.
Second.
Second? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the next issue that we have is mostly important. The reason we were actually meeting on Thursday rather than our normal Tuesdays was to make sure that everybody had had a chance to review the 30-something applications that we had for our three $1,000 SELCO and NESN scholarships. Excuse me. Behind the scenes, everyone has had a chance to review on the board. The members of the board have submitted individually to Val Clemmy, our admin for this issue, and she has collated all the results of the 37 or so applicants that we had. And looking at the list that we've got generated, because without discussing names, we'll just go by the order that they're listed on the results. It looks like that there were three individuals who received the most votes, and were pretty much shared by the folks who had any ballots. Is there any question by any of the board members as to if we don't accept those three, or there's somebody below the line that we should really give further consideration to? Because my own opinion would be to accept the top three vote getters. There are some great candidates. I mean, they're involved in sports. They're involved in their other issues that they've got some handicaps that are involved. There's a number of other things that are going on there. But I thought those three people that are in the top three would be acceptable as scholarship recipients.
Sounds
Matt,
good.
No? John?
I had the three of them in my group, so.
Okay. Well, if we have a motion to accept the top three vote getters, 1, 2, and 3, are the results for the scholarship award winners before we read their names.
So moved.
Okay. And do we have a second, Matt? Yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, so those, and I'm going to help me, folks, if I mess this up. I have a Gianna Boyers, a Jolie Nguyen.
Nugent.
Nguyen, yeah.
Nugent.
Nugent, is that how you pronounce it? I thought it was Nguyen. Anyways, that's okay.
Oh, sorry, Nguyen.
Yeah. And then Drishma Dahal. The three recipients of this year's scholarships from SELCO and NESN. So congratulations to those three. And to the other candidates, I know it's tough. Just realized it was a tough competition among everyone that was there, but some great candidates that had applied. So with that said, I think all three of them as well attend Shrewsbury High School. So, okay. With that said, we'll move on to the next issue is review and consider approval of the building designer selection procedure. And I'm going to turn this over to our general manager to explain as to why we need a building design
Okay,
process.
very good, thank you. So as we've discussed, I think largely dating back to our budget discussion, we've been proceeding, well, even going back further, I guess, when we talked about the Subaru building some 18 months ago. I don't know, I mean, time's flying, so call it 18 months ago. But don't fact check me on that. is the continual pursuit of a new building. So in the budget, we discussed that a bit. And so for 2025, the idea was to bring on this owner's project manager to basically guide us through the process. It's a component of the state laws that regulate building development. And so as we work through the OPM procurement process, we're kind of right on the 1 yard line or so. We're very close, but to their credit, they've also and as part of that process, brought up other steps that are required in order to facilitate building a new building. Whether it's actually carried out or not, these are necessary steps to go through that process. So this building designer selection criteria, if you look at section 1 of the document, it highlights the portion of the Mass General Law that basically specifically dictates how you procure a designer for the building. So step 1 was for us to get an owner's project manager that has the expertise in all of the steps and helps manage the project, hence OPM. And then the next step is the other big step is to basically adopt these selection procedures. The state allows 2 approaches. One, if a community does not have these procedures, there is a default process to follow. But reality is adopting your own local set of procedures is more efficient and better reflective of, or I'd say more clear and better reflective of the process that you follow to hire this designer. So basically this is, since we have not built a building since arguably the 40s, maybe the 70s, if you count some additions. This Mass General Law, Chapter 7C, kind of highlights what needs to be done here. So basically, it's a fairly straightforward document that captures the process that we already follow largely for most of our procurements, with the addition of highlighting the approval body, which is this body, as well as the designer selection committee. It identifies that there's a committee to be involved, but that's another way of saying the group of individuals that evaluate the bids that come in for a designer and then bring it to this board for approval. Let me think of other talking points I may have missed.
And this matches up with what Middleborough and other communities have actually used, and
Yep.
so it's kind of time-tested.
Yep, great question. So with the OPM process, we had that narrowed down to 3 firms that we had interviewed with us internally, as well as Keith from the town side, who, as I think most everyone knows, is an integral part of the town building projects, police station, the one from just the other day,
DPW.
what is that, MFOG, Municipal Facilities Optimization. And so, anyway, so he helped with that, and through that process, we had identified Skanska as the most favorable partner. And so one of the big points of favorability is they are going through this exact project with Middleborough as we speak, except they're about, say, 12 months ahead or so. And so what's great about that is we can leverage what they've already done to apply to our project. And so, to Bob's point, these designer selection procedures are largely identical to what they've used. Some of the other firms did have prior projects with MLPs. As you'll see in the next vote coming up, these are, these procedures and these votes are in alignment with basically how MLPs have constructed buildings over the last decade. So in order to do that, this body would have to adopt these designer selection procedures, which would then give us the guide for how to select a designer for the building. That includes anything from site feasibility to the actual design and then construction. So if you look through it, I think it's relatively straightforward on the process to select the designer. It outlines the details of the criteria through the qualifications process to select the best firms, and And then somewhat unique with buildings, because buildings do overlap, with municipal procurement quite a bit. So that's where it's unique in this, that this body would be approving the designer contract.
So where does Skanska fit into this, the
Oh.
stage of the process?
Okay, good question, sorry. Skanska is hired as our owner's project manager.
Oh.
So they would basically, bring forward all these types of regulations that we need to follow. They do all the record keeping. They help us create the bids.
Yep.
So basically, they're our, support team that specializes in this. We have Chapter 149A is construction manager at risk. So hiring an OPM is already in the laws when you pick this as a requirement along the way.
That obviously conflicts them out from doing the work down the road, right?
Exactly. So Skanska would not be the designer. They wouldn't be doing construction, so they're purely an extension of SELCO to manage the project.
Mm.
But they do have, they have a deep bench of bids, and we had an update meeting a week or so ago, and they have access to supply chain network across the country and across North America, which was actually, I found pretty impressive. So it's purely they're more of the guide as opposed to the actual designer. They have designers on staff, but that's not their role. Their role is to use that designing or expertise to oversee the quality of who we'd hire.
Okay, so a timeline, we approve this, and then the next session, we have to approve potentially you as the member of the construction. What's the follow-on timeline to that? These people, we've got to lay down, we've got to get a design for the building.
Okay.
So where are we looking at maybe sticking a shovel in the ground?
Good question.
And do we have a
Well,
location for where the shovel's going?
Okay, great question. All right, we'll go through a much broader timeline.
And how we're financing it?
Yep,
There's so many questions.
there's a lot of details.
Well, we might as well start getting them out, we got a few
Yeah.
minutes.
Yep, no, that's fine. Hey, I'm happy to talk about this all day. Okay, so more broadly, so all of those subsequent questions really can't happen without a designer on board. So that's partly the reason to bring this forward, is we can get an OPM, they can tell us what what steps we need to follow, but we can't engage in any of those steps without a designer or anyone that we could bring in to do a feasibility study. So that's the impetus to bring this forward now, because this is really the gateway to doing anything else related to this project, whether it moves forward or not. So that's part one. Part two is all these other questions then, where, all going back to the, 18 months or so, we've been identifying what the alternatives there were. We've been working with the town as they go through their municipal facilities process. And so I believe maybe it was a few weeks ago. Yeah, we weren't really sure, but through that discussion and coordination, we identified 248 North Quinsig as the ideal site. It's been owned by the town since the 1930s. It's not in a residential area like all of our facilities, like Parker Road is, Municipal Drive is. Like, this is a really good site for accessibility and, an operation. It's right there next to the post office distribution center. So it's in an area that we wouldn't be disrupting, the residential environment.
Yeah, and it's relatively across from the Donahue Rowing Center.
It's almost straight across. So we've looked at, even going into the details with design, kind of tying in here where, right now it's just ideas. But with that, there's the other benefits. I believe sidewalks are going in there. There's that opportunity to relieve parking that with the regattas,
For the boat, and also for the boat ramp.
for the boat ramps, where we can coordinate, a design that has parking to get people off the road, and now that'll dovetail nicely with the sidewalks. So there's a coordination element that led to that site being ideal. It's, that one main parcel is 4.8 acres, which is slightly smaller than we had identified, but certainly close enough to be workable with the right design. So the next step on that, we weren't quite sure if it would be a spring, as in May, in a few weeks, May town meeting or fall town meeting, and working with the folks down the hall. That is a warrant article for the spring. So what the town would do is turn over care, custody, and control of the parcel to SELCO, which is what you'd see if you go into the GIS for like the service area parcel on Municipal Drive. Towns across the state, this is just it's not a local thing, it's the state is, a town turns over care, custody, and control to the municipal light plant, and then they can use it for their purposes. So that's on the docket for town meeting in May. There's no financial transaction there, so it's like, if we go through designer selection criteria, or there's something that proves to be horrible about the site or anything, like there's no risk to that. It's just, these are administrative steps that need to be checked off before to even do this project. So with the designer selection procedure, so there's, as you can see, there's a few moving parts at the same time. So OPM allows us to know what needs to be done. Designer selection procedures allow us to start assessing the viability of the site and start talking about designs. And 3 is the land question, which is going to town meeting in the spring to get care, custody, and control of a parcel. So those are really the 3, and then once the designer's on board, then we can start looking at design options, the characteristics. We've done some, this isn't the first time we've thought about this, but they put together the actual cost estimates given today's construction environment, and all of those are what now formalizes material to bring forward to this approving body, using the procedure language, this approving body for consideration and incorporation as part of our budgetary considerations.
Okay, and we plan on funding this through SELCO, or in SELCO's membership with MWIC and a bunch of other, rather than coming through the town, coming onto the town's rolls for taxation.
Correct. So we have the option, which is unique to municipal light plants, where we have our partnership with MWIC. So quite often that same pool of financing that's used to build power plants and our ownership stake in Seabrook and
Our solar
and
site.
solar sites, all of that also is used, it's for utility operations. So, MLPs use that for same projects for building a new building. So we can leverage that pool of funds. There's an advantage to that where then it doesn't conflict with any type of borrowing limits with the municipality, as it's, obviously ownership stake in nuclear power plants doesn't, you say, you can't build a new high school because you own Seabrook. Like, it's totally separate financing mechanisms, and so it's.
Is it a debt mechanism through MWIC?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep, so they would, because we have so they issue revenue bonds.
Okay.
So it's a bond, but rather than a tax-based general obligation bond, it's a revenue bond issued through MWIC.
Well, it also allows us to leave our funds, which are considerable, within the treasury of this town,
Yes.
which is used to help support the AAA bond rating that the town has for the other borrowing that it has. So we don't pull that money out. It's still, so when the banks come in to lend money for the municipal garage or to the potential, as discussed at the last special town meeting, the potential addition of the high school, that those AAA bond rating would still be in place, so we wouldn't affect that adversely.
Yep. we've worked, oh, sorry.
No, good.
We've also worked with the treasurer's office to look at investment options for those funds. And so the idea was to look at just, I guess, stronger investment returns. So with all of that money in there, with stronger investment returns, hopefully forward-looking, we can have, we could offset any future borrowing costs quite a bit. I mean, obviously that's market dependent, but offset those borrowing costs with stronger investments that we do through that, with that money.
Okay. And so with all that said, so we get land, we get funding, we get a design, we figure out where we want to put this thing.
Yep.
And now we want to start building it. What's your best estimate as to
Okay.
when we might start actually doing that?
Yep, great question. So, I mean, all this is actually happening pretty quick. I would, dare I say, we're ahead of a schedule that I thought of. The Gantt chart with Skanska, given, some assumptions for the unknowns, has us with a move-in date in, say, summer of 2028. I'd have to go back on my email. I believe so that means they shovel in the ground 24 months before that. So,
Next year.
it'd be next year at some point, in the spring, summer. If all things move forward. It's nice having some of these other projects that are actively slightly ahead of us, because we can just leverage lessons learned, and things like this designer selection criteria are already drafted, and so it's allowed us to kind of move forward more quickly than otherwise normally would happen.
Okay. Okay, any other questions for the town manager, our general manager for, as with the builder design selection procedure? Because if not, can I have a motion to consider approval of said procedure?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, we'll move to the next item, which is closely related to this previous one, is to vote to approve Christopher Roy, SELCO General Manager, as the individual to represent the Building Designer Selection Committee. Do you want to address that as well?
Sure. So more specifically, drilling down to the procedures, if you look at number 3, I'll just read the first sentence here. The approving body shall designate the individual or group of individuals, hereinafter referred to as the committee, who will conduct the designer selection process. So this vote is essentially identifying myself as the point of contact to bring forward to this group as the approving body the results of the designer selection evaluation. And so basically the idea there, to be more clear, I guess, like this group as the approving body according to these procedures most certainly could identify a group of individuals as the committee, but as is the common practice, which is why I kind of brought it forward, and it has proven to be fairly effective. If you identify myself as the GM, as the individual to represent that committee, it just streamlines the communication lines. The idea is we'd still have a group of folks reviewing this, and that would be part of the approval package that you'd see. This just keeps it straightforward that I'm the representative of that group.
Okay. Any motion to appoint Christopher Roy as that individual to
So moved.
represent? Okay, Milton, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, okay, great. So far, so I expect the clearing trees down there and getting the sidewalks in,
Yeah.
and no time at all. Okay, with that said, how about, we haven't had enough hearing from you today,
I
so
know.
let's go to the general
Okay.
manager highlights.
Yeah.
All right. So a few things just to go through. There's been a lot of legislative activity. So starting with the first bullet point, we did have the MWIC Advocacy Day a few weeks ago. I thought it was a really good event. It's something that was done prior to COVID more regularly. It's something that it's been on the docket to resurrect since then. So this is really the first time in a few years that we've done this. Part of the impetus to really jump back on it is something I think we've talked about at a couple of meetings prior. There were a few regulations that were being proposed that were really detrimental to the municipal light plant and public power business model. So this was a way to go to Beacon Hill, talk about public power, remind everyone there about just how advantageous our model is for the strength of the communities we serve and the economy of the Commonwealth. And so we had a number of speakers, as you could see in the summary there. I thought it went very well. Somehow I strong-armed my way into 5 minutes of fame at the podium. But I thought that was really good. And so whether it was coincidental or not, 2 days after that event, we did hear from DOER that they had opted to not include MLPs in the Building Decarbonization Clearinghouse. In other words, it was to kind of force MLPs into the Mass Save program. So that was a big one. That one was, I think, my thought was the biggest issue, biggest win, if you will, but that was the biggest misunderstanding on their part of what are you thinking? So so that right now is we're in a good space there. Not on this summary list on this one, but we just found out a couple days ago. The other one is trying to get a municipal exemption to the advanced clean truck standard, where we do, we're about electrification, but it's where it makes sense. And so we were trying to get the exemptions for electric bucket trucks, where right now, starting this year, we would be required to, all future bucket truck purchases would have to be electric. The point being, the logic test, if you can go out there and even find one, great, maybe we'd consider buying it, but they don't exist. So step one is to get that exemption. Step two is to say our core business model is to restore electricity. And so if we're driving electric vehicles into a major region with no electricity, then what are we going to do? We can't charge back up. So it just made sense for us to have the exemption. So a couple of days ago, there's been a pause on that same criteria. That one is not as, it's a pause, if you will, so there's still work to be done there. But I think that messaging is getting out, that this isn't obstructionist, it's just trying to be logical about how we approach these transitions. And then clean heat standard and the large building energy reporting are ongoing, just to, continue my soapbox. But the large building energy reporting, that's still, at least in my mind, we had I would say a good meeting. A few folks from MEME had met about this, but my concern remains the privacy issue. We have no issue, and in fact like to engage with our large building customers. But there's an issue where sharing their data directly with the state without their approval, I view as a potential privacy issue. We don't share customer data with anybody. So our feedback has been, we're happy to share it with the customer. If you'd like this data for your purposes, same as your taxes or anything else, you can retrieve it from the customer and we'll provide it to them. But we're uncomfortable providing people's, customers' data directly to the state without consent. And then the clean heat standard, there hasn't been much activity with that, so we're just kind of monitoring that. But anyway, the point of all of that, in summary, is we've been really engaging much more with the state level administration, ramping up our presence on Beacon Hill, and we do think it's been positive. you know, with everything in the news about energy prices and you know, and just some of the ridiculous proposals from some of the largest private utilities, like, in my view, you know, this is the next step to a public power renaissance in Massachusetts. You know, I think coming up, I'll forward it around when it comes out, but there's gonna be a small, and I had nothing to do with this, but there's gonna be a small harkening back to the Jim Baker era of Shrewsbury in the 1950s, which was that, you know, mid-century renaissance of public power. So you have the 1900s, when many of the 41 MLPs were formed, major renaissance. You have the 1932 FDR speech as part of his presidential campaign, which really highlighted public power as the benchmark for utilities, providing utility services across the country. So that was a major renaissance period. Then you have the Jim Baker era of the 1950s, where you're looking at public power procuring energy at wholesale rates, the creation of MWIC, investing in generation, having that pool of money we just talked about for buildings. And then there's, you know, we're due, right? You know, you look at it, you know, 50-year increments. We're due for that next renaissance to say, why in the world are we able to deliver absolutely superior utility services at rates that are a fraction of the big players? And so that is a major economic potential there for us to leverage.
Do you get a sense of any buzz, the most recent buzz, I guess, about desire to pass legislation this session?
Yep.
Energy legislation?
Yep, that's a good question. So we're looking at that. Part of, I think, the efforts with this public power business model is as they look at the Energy Affordability Act, what material, you know, content goes into that. Is it actually going to be meaningful? You know, our sense is that even this, you know, $50 bill credit is, you know, no one's happy. It's like, great,
It's a joke.
thanks for $50. like, so this is the point where, you know, where we come in and say, so wait, you're giving people $50 and then you're coming up with, you know, ideas like the Building Decarbonization Clearinghouse, where our model, and it's not one or two examples, as I know I've said before, there's literally 41 examples of communities, which some serve even more towns, so it's almost bordering 50 communities in Mass that have utility services, where you not only save $50, you save hundreds of dollars per month.
Right.
Like,
So my fear is, you know, prior to the winter, when everything was about cost, they were talking about, we're going to do another bill. I remember reading things of,
Yep.
you know, one more, you know, sort of in the direction of carbon neutrality, which is cost, go up. Now all of a sudden the conversation has flipped, and the theme of the buzz of that day was probably more on the affordability. I would imagine,
Yes.
I would hope, even
Yes.
just politically at that point, that's
Yes.
where they're at.
yes.
Hopefully it stays that way.
That is our sense, and that's where, at least my view, and I'm not, you know, the sole vote in this, but that's where it's like, hey guys, we've been here now for, you know, over a century. Like, energy affordability is our thing,
Yeah.
you know. So like, you should be looking at us as the role model, not the other way around. And so that, but yes, to your point, energy
Have they
affordability.
named a House chair?
I'm sorry.
House chair?
Yeah, Cusack.
He's
I'm
the-
sorry, energy.
Yeah. He's the, I forget what he's on, but Jeff
Oh, Jeff Roy.
Roy did he get reappointed
He
as House chair? in the
no.
New session? Yeah.
Yeah.
Is it
He-
Jackie Chan?
No, so we have, Jeff is, shoot. He has another role, it's just not, it's a low, it's a different one.
Yeah.
And then the other one,
Barrett.
we have Barrett,
Senate.
but the big one we've engaged with now is Cusack.
Cusack is represented because he
Yeah.
has,
So, so those have been, he's been really the focal point. He spoke at this advocacy day.
that's good. He's
So-
got the ear of folks.
Yep, so he said, his remarks were really, I thought, really on point, so,
Nice.
so we'll see. So, you know, we're not really, we see what comes down the pike every day.
Yeah.
But I think getting our story out there and educating folks on how, you know, really we're in alignment, you know, we're closer to the constituents than, you know, the shareholders.
Yeah.
So, so yeah, so I think that's been
Okay.
been a big focus point, so.
Take efforts down in Boston.
Exactly, and that was just bullet point number one.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's
Failed
right.
that.
But I won't go through it. I put these in for context, you know, just for other interesting data points. You know, since we had a rate increase at the prior meeting, just for context, you know, you can see where this one happens to be Connecticut, but it's applicable across the state borders in terms of the approach, where, you know, just the upward rate pressure you can see what they're proposing in Connecticut. You know, I find it fascinating where you have your regular electric rate, and then all of a sudden on top of that, you're gonna put storm restoration recovery on top of that, like that's part of your job, put it in it's in your rate. But upward rate pressure is the theme there. We're still monitoring transmission developments. I mean, that's a key part of the future strategy. So I just put the CMP update for the main transmission lines, just to see that, you know, there's still some activity going on there, and they're slowly moving forward. And that's more electric rate increases on the private sector side. And, oh yeah, and just, again, context of the last one I put in there, wholesale power prices in the region rose 300% in February. So these just add context, not specifically for this meeting, but as something to read and keep in mind as we look at our power supply forecasts. And I know I'm gonna jump around a little bit with this one, but like in the integrated resources section, we did not, since there's no change, we didn't feel a need to bring it as a separate
Yep.
agenda item. But these are the things that we look at, the transmission rate increases, this wholesale power prices in the region going up. So this GTA adjustment, right now, we reviewed it, and we didn't see a need to recommend a change, but that's where we continue to monitor it, so potentially in the future, you know, maybe not, you know, at a future meeting in the coming months, we'll see if there's a need or not.
Real quick question on the transmission. Is there anything affecting MWAC or even an opportunity? Are they looking to get involved in any of the projects? Or?
Yep. Okay, great question. Some of these things I'm intentionally vague because we've had some discussions in executive session. But yes, so transmission continues to be a key focal point for MWIC, as as everyone knows. The struggle is, and I'm going to get the percentage wrong, it's something like 85% of transmission is owned by the incumbent investor-owned utilities. And so it's one of those things where getting your foot in the door is some of the harder parts. So we've pursued different partnership opportunities with merchant transmission developers to see, again, once you get your foot in the door, and it's almost like, I'm oversimplifying it, but it's like in order to participate in transmission, they say you need to have transmission experience. But how can you get transmission experience if you haven't got your foot in the door? The idea is once you get the criteria met, you can do it. So yes, a shorter, more concise version is yes, we're looking at that. Earlier it was largely tied to transmission for offshore wind, but with some of that uncertainty, it's not off the table because the project that we had participated in was fully permitted. So it was further down the path than some of the others. But again, like these other projects, we still look at other transmission opportunities. It'd be really nice to have another connection point. So, so yes, I mean, it's a slow, steady negotiation on trying to get ourselves as a part of that project. So I don't know if that answered your.
Part of the ISO RFP,
Oh,
those
so-
projects?
Yes.
Yeah.
So so yes, I guess, and I'll just say, the idea is, obviously because we're less than 20% load share of the bigger slice of the pie, the idea is finding that partner. Obviously the incumbent IOUs aren't as excited about partnering with public power for those types of things, so that's been the struggle, is finding an outside transmission developer.
It is kind of sort of set up for their success.
Yes.
No doubt about that.
Yes. Yep. And so it's, but then encouraging people that have a say in this, ISO or others, like, hey, look, when you involve public power, you drive costs down. Like, that's the name of the game here. So, yeah, so it's not a straightforward path, but we continue to look for any cracks that we can use. And so, like you said, this ISO one that I included here, a couple of bullet points above. We don't have obviously a direct application, but we're looking at options.
Yep.
All right, I guess I'll move to the HR
Yeah. great.
HR side of
Yep.
things. So perhaps word has spread, but this is probably one of the most unfortunate things to have to announce is our Director of IT, Greg Honorato, lifelong resident of Shrewsbury, grew up in here, graduated from here, unexpectedly passed away a little over a week ago. So we've been navigating that from not only, a professional standpoint, but a personal standpoint. Right after this meeting, we'll be setting up, his family's looks like they'll be doing a private service. But again, someone like that who's, IT has a reach across the organization, and then someone like Greg, who has been a lifelong Shrewsbury community member. There's a lot of people impacted, so we're going to have celebration of life type of thing at, I believe, at 11:30.
11:30 to 12:30 here in the.
12:30 here.
Yep.
So please, if you're available, feel free to attend.
Yeah, that was a tough one, because
That's tough.
he's only 42, I think, and,
Yep.
it's just a tough loss, and a very valuable member of the team, so.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. He's went to school with a lot of folks in the building. So it's, that one, brutal. But, yep, so we'll have that today, and that's a big knowledge gap to try and close there. So, so that will be later today. And then we added some positive bullet points in there. So Rick is in the back there. So we have Rick is the manager of business development and compliance oversight for the fiber division, as we try and transition our cable terminology to the next phase of that business. As we discussed last meeting, so Joelle Maliver had left. So that was another knowledge gap that we're trying to close, and so this was one of the strategies we used for that, where there's an ever-increasing amount of compliance matters, looking at the dynamic landscape of pricing and competition and all of that. So Rick has been involved in that for a long time, and it was a natural transition to make sure we didn't miss a beat, if you will, with respect to that. So Rick's in that role, so our T's are crossed and I's are dotted with respect to that from a report on the transition from last meeting. And then subsequent to that, we have Val, who makes all the magic happen, is now officially marketing and communications manager. So those are two things that were happening concurrently. So thank you to you two for being so great. And so those are two things I just wanted to highlight there. And then in the interest of time, I guess
A whole heck of a lot of,
there's a, a lot of just informational items. Couple of interesting tidbits I'll just kind of ad lib on for the electric side. Like one here, kind of midway down, the Prologis UPS job on Centec. If you drive down there, the land is being cleared, like there's a lot of activity. So that is interesting. We've incorporated that is, and please anyone feel free to correct me if I misspeak. That's about that would be a 10% increase in our annual sales. That's a substantial project. And I'm not, being intentionally conservative. There's another one in a different part of town being proposed that's even bigger than that. So, we have, I think Shrewsbury is a really desirable place to be. And so we're seeing a really big uptick in development in the last few months. That's a good thing. At the same time, it's put a bit of extra work on our engineering team to try and look at how we can serve this unusually large load in certain areas of town that need infrastructure upgrades anyway. So we've been looking at how to balance that. Yes, bless you. How to balance that desirable load, and if I'm looking at a company, some of these analysis like we do for Prologis based on projected consumption, we'd be saving them multiple millions of dollars per year just by simply locating a town like that. You're talking over a 10-year period, $50 million, and beyond that, over a 20-year span, you're $100 million in savings simply just by existing in this community as opposed to a neighboring one. So we're working on that. That's just my point of highlighting that is there's a cascading effect with changing our infrastructure upgrade approach because we have to then meet the capacity needs of these large customers. So moving on to just fiber's proceeding. You can see we've been updating ONTs, Wi-Fi. The big one, I don't know why I went from bottom to top, but the dark fiber path to Boston, we're continuing. I know we reported on a bunch of the details last meeting. This is one of the items we were working on to bolster that reliability. This dark fiber path is a more direct route to Boston. More direct generally means more efficient and less points of failure. So we've been working on that. Oh, and it says it right there in the paragraph. So that's one of the things, more redundancy. Same as the transmission system on the electric side, right? Trying to have multiple access points for data connection.
Who leads that effort? Because I imagine it's not just us running a line to Boston.
So that is us going to find existing companies that have that access.
Okay.
So we have other partners right now. We have Cogent. Previously, we were fully relying on Cogent's routes to Worcester or Boston. Now it's also diversifying to other companies like a Crown Castle or a number of others out there. Sometimes, ironically, it's Verizon, other Earthlink. Like there's others. Hurricane Electric. When you see the warrants, it threw me off when I first saw it. It says Hurricane Electric, but it's fiber. But when you sign those, that's another diverse path. So working with them, it still doesn't alleviate to kind of the thing we talk about, where if there's a choke point in like Cleveland, or something like that, we have, our hands are really tied. We don't have much influence over that, but diverse paths to Boston, Worcester, or other areas in the region, we have much more control, and those are the partners we search for and basically lease fiber from them.
So similar to transmission, is the sort of advent of data centers and just data flying around everywhere making congestion issues and pricing issues more challenging for fiber yet, or probably down the road for sure, but are we seeing any of that yet?
I think pricing has seemed to actually be very competitive. I hesitate to say it, but I'll answer the question. We have seen prices go down a little bit, in terms of what we paid per, you pick your unit, but per megabit. So similar to power supply, it seems like prices have gone down, but to your point, with increased consumption, I think that's where you see issues like a hurricane, knocking down a fiber line in the Carolinas. Now everyone has to route all of their data, and the system wasn't designed to handle that congestion. So that's where you'll see the buffering. But locally, in terms of pricing and bandwidth acquisition, we've been able to get that, and the prices remain competitive. And when I say go down, I don't mean like, huge, double-digit decreases, but it's remained steady. So I think that, and we look at that, we enter into those bandwidth contracts as well, same thing as power supply, we look at it the same way, so we secure that. So that's, multiple fiber paths and bandwidth contracts are equivalent to our power supply and transmission grids, so we kind of manage it the same way. And look at that. I didn't even say the Tordex negotiation. There's one of our bandwidth ones right there. I forgot about that. Is in the highlights. So we have a Tordex bandwidth contract, and there's also supporting the answer, no cost increase in 2025, despite rising. It was almost verbatim. Thanks to Rick. And just you can see some of the IT things that are ongoing. Just speaking on the SELCO side specifically, we're looking at the electric SCADA migration, so that project is ongoing to upgrade our SCADA system. Much of that, it will be cloud-based as well. Yeah,
Okay.
that's.
Any other questions for the general manager?
No.
If
I
not,
feel like I've been talking for a while. I'm
no,
sorry.
that's great, yeah, I'll give you a break.
It's a crush issue today.
I think, first off, we need to make sure we pass our
Yes.
paperwork around so the warrants get signed in lieu of. Okay. And the next thing is, next meeting, May 27th, is, looks like that's what we're proposing. Does that check with everybody's calendar? May 27th.
Not with me.
Okay, with that said, we'll say then the meeting will be May 27th. And do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second that. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.